I didn't know how, and I was also afraid of men.
Really?
Oh yeah, I was afraid of men, yes.
Seems like old times, dinner dates and flowers. Look at you. Seems like old time.
The Tragedy of Diane Keaton. On October 11th, 2025, the world lost a singular voice in cinema. Diane Keaton, the Oscar-winning actress who redefined what it meant to be a leading lady in Hollywood, passed away peacefully at her home in California. She was 79 years old. Diane Keaton didn't just act in movies. She revolutionized them. With her trademark wit, her fearless authenticity, and her refusal to conform to Hollywood's expectations, she carved out a space for complex, intelligent women on screen. But perhaps more importantly, she lived her life exactly as she portrayed her characters, on her own terms. She was born Diane Hall on January 5, 1946, in Los Angeles, California, to Dorothy and Jack Hall. Growing up in Santa Ana during the conservative 1950s, young Diane was already showing signs of the independent spirit that would define her career. Her mother, Dorothy, had once harbored dreams of the theater before settling into domestic life, a choice that would profoundly impact how Diane viewed marriage and women's roles. In her family's modest suburban home, Diane watched her mother navigate the expectations placed on women of that generation. She saw brilliance subdued, creativity channeled into homemaking, and dreams deferred for family duty. It was a lesson that would stay with her forever, the cost of losing oneself in someone else's story. After studying drama at Santa Ana College, Diane made the bold decision to move to New York City in the late 1960s. The city was electric with cultural revolution, and she found herself at the heart of it all. When she discovered another actress had already registered the name Diane Hall with Actors Equity, she made a choice that seemed simple, but was actually profound. She took her mother's maiden name, Keaton, as her own. In 1968, at just 22 years old, she landed her Broadway debut in the groundbreaking musical Hair. The production was famous for its nude scene at the end of Act 1, but Diane refused to participate, even when offered extra money. It was her first public act of defiance against industry expectations, a preview of the independent choices that would define her career. It was through Hair that she met Woody Allen, who cast her in his play Play It Again, Sam. Their creative partnership would span decades and produce some of cinema's most memorable work. But it began with something deeper, a meeting of kindred spirits who understood the beauty in neurosis, the elegance in awkwardness. Their romantic relationship was brief but intense. When it ended, something remarkable happened. Instead of the usual Hollywood pattern of former lovers avoiding each other, Diane and Woody maintained a friendship and creative collaboration that would outlast most marriages in their industry. In 1972, director Francis Ford Coppola made a decision that would change cinema history. He cast this relatively unknown stage actress as Kay Adams in The Godfather. It was a controversial choice. Many questioned whether the quirky girl from Broadway could hold her own alongside Marlon Brando and Al Pacino. She could. And she did. As Kay Adams, Diane brought something unprecedented to the violent world of the Corleones: moral clarity. She wasn't just Michael's wife, she was the conscience of the film, the character who dared to say what others only whispered. In The Godfather Part 2, her devastating confession about the abortion, delivered with quiet strength, became one of cinema's most powerful moments. "It wasn't a miscarriage, Michael. It was an abortion," she said, her voice steady as she delivered the words that would shatter their marriage and challenge everything Michael believed about family and power. But it was 1977's Annie Hall that truly cemented Diane Keaton's place in film history and popular culture. Working again with Woody Allen, she didn't just play Annie Hall, she co-created her. The character's distinctive wardrobe came from Keaton's own closet. The oversized blazers, loose ties, vests, and men's shirts that she wore because they felt comfortable and authentic. Costume designer Ruth Morley later admitted that she simply let Diane dress herself for the role. She had this incredible instinct for what Annie would wear, Morley recalled. It wasn't fashion, it was character. The impact was immediate and lasting. Women across America began adopting the Annie Hall look, but more importantly, they were seeing a new kind of female character on screen, one who was intelligent, neurotic, funny, and real. Annie Hall wasn't trying to be perfect or conventionally beautiful. She was just authentically herself, and that authenticity was magnetic. The Academy recognized the performance's groundbreaking nature, awarding Keaton the Oscar for Best Actress. In her acceptance speech, she thanked Woody Allen, but also seemed to acknowledge something larger. This is for everyone who's ever felt awkward and made it work anyway. As her career flourished, Hollywood expected Diane to follow the traditional script for successful actresses of her generation. She was linked romantically with some of the industry's most eligible men. Warren Beatty, the legendary charmer known for his reluctance to commit. Al Pacino, her passionate co-star from the Godfather series. And of course, her ongoing creative relationship with Woody Allen. Each of these relationships was significant and deeply felt. With Warren Beatty, she found intellectual stimulation and glamour. With Al Pacino, there was intensity and shared artistic vision. With Woody Allen, there was creative symbiosis and genuine friendship. But in each case, Diane made the same choice. She chose herself. "I don't think I'm the marrying kind," she once said in an interview. "I'm too independent, too set in my ways. I watched my mother give up her dreams, and I swore I'd never do that." It wasn't a rejection of love or partnership. It was a recognition that for her, marriage might mean losing the very qualities that made her who she was. This decision came with costs. There were moments of loneliness, times when she wondered if she was missing something essential to the human experience. But she never wavered in her commitment to her own path, even when it meant going against every societal expectation for women of her generation. In the 1980s and 1990s, Diane continued to challenge herself artistically. Looking for Mr. Goodbar showcased her dramatic range in a role that was both dangerous and controversial. Reds, Warren Beatty's epic about American communist John Reed, proved she could handle historical drama. Baby Boom, and later Father of the Bride, showed her comedic gifts while exploring themes of modern womanhood and family. But perhaps her most radical choice came later in life. In 1996, at the age of 50, Diane adopted her first child, a daughter she named Dexter. 5 years later, she adopted a son, Duke. Single motherhood after 50 was virtually unheard of in Hollywood at the time, but Diane approached it with the same thoughtful determination she brought to her career choices. "I wanted to be a mother," she said simply. "I didn't need to be a wife to make that happen." She threw herself into parenting with characteristic intensity, often spotted at school events and soccer games, just another mom in oversized sunglasses and comfortable clothes. Her children grew up with a mother who had lived fully and authentically, who had never compromised her essential self for societal approval. They saw a woman who worked hard, loved deeply, and made unconventional choices with courage and grace. Diane's influence extended far beyond her filmography. Her Annie Hall wardrobe revolutionized fashion, making androgynous dressing not just acceptable, but chic. Designers like Ralph Lauren and Giorgio Armani credited her with changing how women dressed for power and comfort. The blazer and tie look became a symbol of feminist empowerment, a way for women to claim space in male-dominated environments while maintaining their femininity. More significantly, she changed how Hollywood viewed aging actresses. Instead of disappearing after 50, Diane became more visible, more relevant. Films like Something's Gotta Give in 2003 proved that audiences wanted stories about complex women of all ages. At 57, she played a successful playwright navigating love and sexuality later in life, bringing both vulnerability and strength to the role. Throughout her career, she maintained her friendship with Woody Allen even when it became controversial. When allegations surfaced about Allen's personal life, many in Hollywood distanced themselves from him. Diane did not. She spoke about the complexity of friendship, about loyalty, about the difference between the artist and the art. It was another example of her refusal to take the easy path, to make choices based on public opinion rather than personal conviction. Her later films continued to explore themes of independence and authenticity. Whether playing a grandmother in Because I Said So, or a widow finding herself in And So It Goes, Diane brought depth and humor to roles that could have been stereotypical. She proved that women could be funny, sexy, and compelling at any age. As news of her passing spreads, tributes pour in from colleagues and fans alike. Director Nancy Meyers, who worked with Diane on several films, said, "She was fearless in her authenticity. She never tried to be anyone but herself, and that's what made her extraordinary." Al Pacino, her co-star and former partner, released a statement saying, "Diane was unlike anyone I've ever known. She had this incredible ability to be vulnerable and strong at the same time. She taught me that you could be neurotic and powerful, uncertain and confident. She was a contradiction that somehow made perfect sense." Looking back at Diane Keaton's remarkable life, what emerges is not just the story of a talented actress, but the portrait of a woman who dared to live on her own terms. In an industry that often demanded conformity, she insisted on authenticity. In a culture that pressured women to define themselves through relationships with men, she defined herself through her work, her friendships, her role as a mother, and most importantly, her relationship with herself. She proved that there isn't just one way to be a woman, one path to fulfillment, one definition of success. She showed that you could love deeply without losing yourself, that you could be a devoted mother without being a wife, that you could age without apology and work without compromise. Perhaps most importantly, she demonstrated that authenticity isn't just about being true to yourself. It's about having the courage to remain true to yourself even when everyone else suggests you should be someone different. In a world full of performance and pretense, Diane Keaton was relentlessly, beautifully real. As we remember her today, we don't just mourn the loss of a great actress, we celebrate the legacy of a woman who changed what it means to be a woman in Hollywood and beyond. She didn't just break barriers, she ignored them entirely, walking her own path with grace, humor, and unwavering authenticity. Diane Keaton once said, "I think what's important is to be present in your life, to be aware, to make choices that feel right for you." She lived those words every day, and in doing so, she gave us permission to do the same. That may be her greatest gift, not just the films she made or the characters she created, but the example she set of a life lived fearlessly and authentically. In a town built on illusion, she was refreshingly real. In an industry obsessed with youth, she embraced every stage of her life. In a culture that often diminishes women's choices, she expanded them. Diane Keaton didn't just act, she inspired. And that inspiration will continue long after the final credits roll.